name is Deb Schaffer. I'm a principal consultant with Stone Ridge Software, and I welcome you to this DynamicsCon presentation of new and uncommonly used features in Dynamics GP. I'd like to thank the DynamicsCon teams and everyone for the votes for this session. I appreciate that, and I appreciate being able to present to you on these new and uncommonly used features in Dynamics GP. So we are going to start with the new features in Dynamics GP. And this last release in October, was really based on these top areas. So ease of use, customer requests, and extended functionality. And so with that, the things that we're going to take a look at will be scroll through account segments, saving inquiry sort options, saving an inquiry go-to. Then under customer requests, there were a lot of requests for being able to update account descriptions in the mass modify functionality, saving your all-in-one viewer settings. So when you go in and out of the all-in-one view, being able to save those settings for your users so you don't have to reset them each time. Also being able to save the US payroll transaction entry defaults and copy-paste payroll transactions from Excel. So very similar to our GL and now Payables copy-paste, we brought that functionality into payroll transactions. Then I'll show you how to mask Social Security numbers on the US W-2, which I realize W-2s are out already, but definitely just a good reminder. And then Safe Pay, displaying the employee name from the check. And then our last section within the new features is the extended functionality. So being able to summary post accounts receivable cash receipts, adding auto post for workflow batch approvals, and then workflow approvers counts, and removing the carbon copy email in workflow maintenance. And we're going to walk through each of those. Then for our uncommonly used features in Dynamics GP, we're going to take a look at the integration of payables and purchasing to fixed assets, management reporter, using account categories to design your row definitions, reconciling the GL routines, and just a refresher on that copy-paste for the general ledger and purchasing transactions. So in this presentation, I also included those layouts for copy-paste. So in the upper left corner here, this is for the GL copy-paste. So we need our reference, which can just be a date, or you can put in beginning balances if you're setting up a new company. Then we have our account number in the full account number string. So it doesn't need to be split into segments. So as an example, when you go in and you do your, maybe you add some new accounts and you add them through a macro, you would have those split by segment. In doing copy-paste, you don't need to have those split. We do need to split out though debits and credits, so you can't do a single column with parentheses around credit entries. You do need to do a separate debit and credit column. And when you copy this in, this is going to copy in with that transaction information, but you won't include the header line when you copy that. This next section is for the payables transaction entry copy-paste. And so this layout is very similar. We're going to have our vendor first, our purchase amount. If there's a trade discount, we can include that here. We have freight, miscellaneous, our document number, a purchase order number, and the cash amount. Now, we do have the ability to put in distributions as well for that. So that's going to be additional columns for that copy-paste layout. And again, this is included in my PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see that or take a screenshot of it when we're going through this. And then the last one down below here is the new functionality where we can copy in payroll transactions. And this is for US payroll. So we'll have our employee ID, the transaction type, so whether it's a pay code or a deduction or benefit, the code that we're using for that, and that's your pay code, then the amount, our pay rate if we have that, our department, position, and then our date range for that transaction. So again, these are the layouts for copy-paste. We have our general ledger, our accounts payable, payables transactions, and our payroll transactions for US payroll. So with that, let's go ahead and get into our demo. So I've got GP here, and the first thing that we're going to take a look at is scrolling through the account segments. So account segments is in our financial setup and segment, and this new feature now allows us to scroll through each of our different segments that we have based on a segment ID. So we can choose then which segment that we want, whether it's division, department, or account. This is Fabricam. And then with that, we can choose that and then scroll through. So this is a really great function. Before, when we were working with this, if you wanted to update descriptions or anything, you had to go bring up each one individually, save, and then bring it up again. I'm going to jump just a little bit here, and I'm going to go take a look at that update account description in the mass modify function. So when we go into our transactions, sorry, not transactions, cards, and under cards, financial and mass modify, when we go in there, this is our typical window. We can go in here and we can copy accounts if we want to. But now we have an option to choose update account description. So if you click on that modify dropdown, you'll have update account description, and now we can go in and we can update those descriptions very easily using the mass modify chart of accounts. The next thing that we're going to take a look at here is saving the inquiry options. So when we go into places like purchasing or sales, the things that we look at there for our inquiry options are, if we go into, as an example, transactions for vendors, and we want to look at a particular vendor, so we would bring up our vendor here, and I'm just going to choose advanced. And in our view now, the way that I save my window preferences here, I can click on this Save Window Preferences, and the next time that I come into this window, these will be saved, and I'll open it up and it'll still be the same settings. So it's just a bit of a time saver that when you get a window or an inquiry set the way you want it, then you would be able to go in and save those settings. Again, this is in payables, this is in sales, in purchasing, so you can go in and save those views. The next place that I want to take a look is the Save Inquiry Go To. So when we go into sales, and we're going to take a look at our sales, let's go to inquiries, and go into sales documents. And we're going to do an inquiry here on a document number. And now if we go under additional, oops, sorry, no, we're doing go-tos. So when we go into go-tos, then we can go in and take a look at the sales transaction inquiry. Oops, let me just get this closed out here. So looking at our inquiry go-tos, and we can save these now. I'm going to go into sales and inquiries and sales documents. And we're going to take a look at the go-to. And I'm actually going to click on a line first. So then go to, and then sales transaction entry. And that's going to take us right into our sales transaction entry window so we can see that transaction. So a really nice way to get back to that original transaction, similar to our other drill down, drill back features from the GL back to the original transactions. Now we can do the same thing in our inquiry windows as well. So again, that's just from the sales order processing window. We also have this available in purchasing. So it's go in, do your inquiry that you're looking for, and then from the go-to, you can go into either sales transaction inquiry zoom or directly into sales transaction entry. All right, then the next thing that we're going to take a look at is saving the all-in-one views for users. So again, similar to for purchasing and payables, that if we go into sales and we look at a customer and we want to bring up our particular customer, so I'm just going to do a lookup on my customer and I'll bring up advanced, and now I'm going to go into my all-in-one view. So similar to the other customer requests, when you go in and you set this window the way that you want it set, it's nice to have it just stay so you don't have to come in here and reset it each time. So now when you click on the options button up at the top, you can identify which windows or which order of your, which columns you want to see your data in. So if you change this and you don't want quotes, you can take that off. And then these selections are going to stay when you close out of this window. And again, this works not only for customers, but for vendors and for your other all-in-one views. All right, the next area that we're going to take a look at is in payroll. So there's a number of things in payroll. And the first thing that we're going to look at here is the transaction entry defaults. So when we go into transaction entry, in this window, when we select our batch, and so I'm just going to bring up my test 2 batch in here. And if we set the days worked, so if I say that my days worked is 10 and my weeks worked is 2, I want this to save. Because otherwise, every time I come in here, when I'm making changes, trying to do payroll, every time I have to reset that days worked and weeks worked. So now with your batch, when you close out of this window and you bring it back up, the days worked and weeks worked will stay. So I'm just going to close out of here and I'm going to go back into transaction entry and I'm going to bring up my batch. And now my days worked and weeks worked also work. The next thing in this window is adding that copy paste functionality. So from my PowerPoint, I gave you that layout of the copy paste, and you can now highlight those transactions in your batch and then bring those transactions in. And I apologize, I didn't have that highlighted to bring that in. So I'm going to get my paste validation report, which is fine because that's a good thing to see. And this paste validation report is just going to show you, similar to our validation report for the general ledger, if let's say there's an account missing or the description isn't right or your date isn't right in your reference, something like that, you're going to get that validation report that pops up. And you're going to get the same thing here when you do that paste. So in this case, my employee ID wasn't found. It's because I didn't have the file highlighted. This will bring in your transactions into your batch. And actually, I am going to close this batch and bring up, I do have another one that I did bring in. So I'm going to bring up my first test batch. And this is what my transaction will look like when it comes into this system. And again, my days worked and weeks worked stay. My batch is posted in. And once you've posted that batch in, then you can go in and make any edits or adjustments or additions that you need to. So the one thing that I will say with this copy paste is that this works on a brand new fresh batch. So if I go in and I want to copy paste some additional information in here, I can't. The paste is not available. The paste becomes available when you do a new batch, new transaction, and you can copy paste that in. All right. The next thing that I want to talk through is masking the Social Security number on W-2s. So if you go into print W-2s, and again, I know it's after January 31st, so all of the W-2s are out this year, but just as a reference, you'll notice down at the bottom of the screen we have that partial mask of the Social Security number. So the first 5 characters are X'd out on the W-2 when you use this partial mask. And this partial mask then becomes available when you click on the W-2 forms, and then you can identify if you want to partially mask those the Social Security numbers again, the first 5 characters. And then along with payroll checks, the call out is that for your SafePay for payroll, we'll now have the employee name on it, which comes from the check itself, and that'll be used for SafePay. The next area that I want to take a look at is that summary post. So extended functionality, doing a summary post for cash receipts. And where we initially saw this was in administration and company. So if we go into administration and company, and then into our options, the very last option in this top section is that automatically post cash receipts deposits. And so this comes into play when you're posting your cash receipts and you want to do, you want that summary value. So when you actually do your deposit, you're not doing your deposit as a one per entry or 1 per cash receipt. When it hits your bank, it goes in as that deposit total. So you want to make sure that you are doing that summary post for your cash receipt deposits, and you can do the setup for that as part of your posting. So I'm just going to leave, I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go in and look at our posting. And when we go into sales, and we want to look at our cash receipts. So here we want to make sure that we're posting through the GL and making sure that whether it's, so this is transaction posting that's posting through, plus we've got our post to GL and post through here. So we're going to post through for both of those to do that summary posting. And just the call out in this window in posting setup. If you come in here and you are looking at, say, the default, just as a reminder. So if you're in here as all, and you make a change, or you're just looking and you had this marked as post through for a transaction posting, you want to make sure that you verify that you did or didn't change that. So when you come into this window, if you save out of here, it's going to reset your default. So you do want to be very careful in this window. But if you've gone through and done settings like posting through the GL for transaction posting, that you save that and it stays marked for when you close out of here. All right, then there was some extended functionality added to workflows. And so within workflows, again, working through our administration area here. So in workflows and workflow maintenance, the add auto post for batch approvals. So that auto post now can be handled through those particular batches and posting those transactions as an auto post. The additional, so there's a couple things in here. So there's the auto post, then there's the count for the number of approvers. So now we can track how many approvers we need to have within this window. And then the additional piece that was done in this window is getting rid of, or being, sorry, not getting rid of, but being able to edit the carbon copies on the emails. So if we go into, oops, not this window, let me cancel out of here. So if we go into our, I'm actually on the wrong page. So let me get back here. There we go. So in our options window here, sending notifications for completed options, we can go in here now and we have the ability that when we do a submit, we can send that carbon copy to. Well, you weren't able to edit that before, and now you're able to edit or remove that carbon copy email for your workflow. All right, so I am going to just discard my changes out of here. And the next area that we are going to, oh, sorry, one more thing here. So here's our auto post when the workflow is complete. And you can check this on, and this will automatically then post the transaction once that workflow is completed. So if you're waiting for an approval for the PM batch and you get that approval, then GP will go through and post that approval for you once that workflow is completed. So I'm going to close out of here. And the next thing that we are going to take a look at is the integration of payables and purchasing to fixed assets. So this can be a real time saver when you're setting up fixed assets, or if you're, let's say, adding a lot of fixed assets for a particular time period. And the first thing that you need to do to set this up is go into fixed assets and go into company. So under our setup, under financial, fixed assets, because fixed assets is in with financial, we go into company, and here's where we can set our purchasing options. So we have our post purchasing through fixed assets, and we have post purchase order processing through fixed assets, and we can either do it by account or by receipt line. We can include our matching invoices, and then we could choose to delete those transactions immediately. I would leave this unchecked if you're using this for the first time, just so you can see those transactions, and you can do that reconciling just so you can see and make sure that everything that you expected to happen did happen. So once we've got this set, then we want to go into our accounts, and our accounts here are account groups. So typically we're looking at our asset costs when we're purchasing those assets. And so I'm going to close here, and then I'm going to close out of our company setup, and we're going to go into our purchasing posting accounts. So in our purchasing posting accounts, we can assign those posting accounts that we want to trigger when we do a transaction. So right now you can see I've got my furniture and fixtures set up. I also have a fixed asset clearing, and then I have just a test account that I set up if we were doing like an automatically expense, or if there was some transaction that you wanted to track besides that asset account. So then once you have those accounts set up, and we've identified that my class for this one is for furniture, then when you go in and you do a payables transaction that goes to that account, so I'm going to go into purchasing, and I'm just going to do a purchasing transaction. So I'll do a PM transaction, and I'm going to tab through, and we'll just say it's a new desk. And we do have this long description now, so we can add more details if we need to. And I'm going to choose my vendor, and we'll put my document number in here, and a PO, and however much my desk was. So we've purchased our desk. We go into our distributions, and when we purchase that desk, now let's say instead of expensing this, this is going to be a fixed asset. So it's going to be my fixed asset account. So I can do a search if I don't remember my account, or I can choose by description. So I'm going to choose my furniture and fixtures, and it's $1,200. So now I'm going to click on OK here. And I don't have a batch ID on this, so I'm just going to post this transaction. And so when I post this transaction, this is going to give me not only my typical posting journals, so I'll run my transaction posting journal to the screen. My other transactions are typical transactions. I have AA installed here, so I also get those posting journals. And so we've got our typical posting journal for payables, gives us our accounts down below and our details. And now when I go into fixed assets though, and I'm going to go into cards and accounts under, not accounts under financial, but my fixed asset general. And when I go into this window, I can see in my purchases area that I now have a transaction that was created so that I know that I need to do this furniture account. It's going to default in my acquisition cost, I can identify my asset ID if I'm using an auto incrementing, which is available by setting it up in the company setup for fixed assets, or I can put in my own asset ID. Have my descriptions as usual. It's going to default in my furniture and fixtures, and then from here I can go into my book and identify. I should probably look at that and make sure I grab the right number. And I haven't saved that yet, so let's save that. Close, and we'll go back to our go-to. There we go. And our book, so internal, I've got my costs. Everything's defaulted in based on what I've set up for that particular class and book combination, straight line, 7 years. And so now I've got my fixed asset added. All right, and the same works whether you do purchase order processing or payables transactions. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is using account categories within Management Reporter. So your account categories are set on every account in your GL, and I'm just going to bring up a couple here. So looking at my accounts payable account, I have my category defined as accounts payable. So when I look at my account categories, I can do a lookup here or under setup and categories, and I'm just going to open that up here. We have our 48 out-of-the-box categories in the system. Now, GP allows you to add additional categories, as many as you need, for those categories to split out. So not only if you need to change names, but if you need to add additional account categories, you can absolutely do that. And you would just enter in here, and let's say we wanted to do we wanted to call out advertising. Oh, I cannot type today, sorry. And we'll call this advertising and promotion, and let's say we wanted to also call out vehicle expense. And you would just keep adding those for any of the categories, additional categories that you needed. Once you have your categories set, now you can go into your account and you can choose that account category for each one of your accounts. So I am going to actually clear this and let's just create an account. And actually, I'm going to clear that again because I wanted to put a department on that. And this is going to be administration, and we're going to call it advertising. And I don't need an alias for that. And my category is going to be advertising and promotion, the category that I just added. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of my list and grab my advertising. And this is going to be a P&L account, and it's a debit balance. And I'm going to save my account. And once I've added that, now I would add in transactions for that account that I've just added, and then I would go into Management Reporter, and let me just bring that over here. And then I can go in and create my report based on my categories. So I know I set up an expense account, but you'll see the same thing when we look at the balance sheet here. So if I go into, this is just my default row definition for my balance sheet default. And if I look at my row definition here, my row definitions are based on account categories. And so if I wanted to, let's just say, I know it's not right, but let's say that I'm going to add my new account category of advertising and promotion here, then I can go into my account categories for my dimensions, and I can do a lookup in my advertising and promotions. I had Management Reporter open. I need to refresh my new account category. So I am going to just leave that for now. But if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll be available after the presentation airs for any questions. So please go ahead, put your questions in the chat for anything that I've covered, and then we can go through it. So the benefit to doing an account category as a grouping or an identifier for your link back to dimensions in GP is that now whenever you add an account, you don't have to come into the report and update it, because as long as you've put it into the correct category, that category is going to pull all of your accounts based on how you have them set in GP itself. So you can still do the same type of functionality where you do potentially new cash accounts or accounts receivable, and as long as you've assigned them to that account category, which is required, you can do a grouping based on that, and you don't have to do any edits to your management report or reports. So, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out on that. But the account category does save a lot of work in maintaining your MR reports. So I'm going to go back to GP, and we're going to take a look at the GL Reconcile. So the Reconcile to GL, what this does is this allows you to quickly, or at least more quickly, see if you've got differences between your subledger and your general ledger. And you can do this Reconcile to GL underneath Financial Routines and Reconcile to GL. You're going to have your reconciliation and your date, and then you can choose your date range. So if you haven't used this before, you probably want to just take a month as a date range for that, to do that walkthrough and just make sure you're seeing how things work. And then you can do extended periods of time. So let's say you haven't been reconciling for a while. Maybe you want to go and pull this by a quarter. You can do that. You do need to really watch your dates though. So if you've got some crossover dates. So there's a lot of companies that, while yes, yesterday was the end of February, you may keep February open until Thursday or Friday this week. So instead of leaving that open, there's two things you can do related to that. One is make sure that if you're really going to leave, let's say, payables open until Friday, which would be the 4th, then you would want to make sure that your end users are actually putting in the correct dates. So putting in those dates that really those transactions are 2/28 and they need to be included in February's transactions. If you have transactions and you're trying to sift through, well, this transaction was dated on March 4th, but it really wasn't a February transaction, it does really become important to have those end users watching those transaction dates so you don't have those crossover issues. But in the case that you do, you can expand your date ranges here. So if you wanted to go from like 2/28 to 4/2 for a range, you could do that and see those transactions. Then you want to make sure that you're choosing which module. So you can do these reconciles for payables, receivables, inventory, and bank reconciliation. And then you're going to define where your output file is going to go. So this is where you're going to save this on your machine or server or however you're working. Define that. You want to make sure you define the accounts that you're looking at. So you may have not only your accounts, your AP account in this case, but you may have an accrued purchases account that you want to take a look at as well. And you can just define that accrued purchases account. Once you have this all set, then you're going to go to Process, and this is going to create the file. And this file, as soon as it opens here, and I will bring this right on over. This file is going to be created and it's going to be split. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller just so you can see, and then I'll make it large again. But what we have is on the right side we have our payables transactions, and on the left side we have our general ledger transactions. So we have our potentially matched transactions, unmatched, and then our matched transactions. So really what you want to look at is if you have unmatched transactions here, you want to find out why. So Do you have transactions that are maybe sitting in AP that haven't posted yet? Do you have general ledger transactions that were keyed directly to your payables account? You need to check those and find out, should you have had that transaction entered in directly to AP from the GL? If that's something that you want to look at, one of the things that you can do for that is back on your accounts page and cards and account. That's what this allow account entry means. So a lot of times for your subledger main accounts, so your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, sometimes inventory, you don't want to allow account entry to this. And what this means is you can go in and enter a GL transaction directly to this account. If you uncheck this, users won't be able to do that. They cannot create a journal entry, a GL journal entry to that AP account. So that's one way that you can fix if you have transactions being entered directly into your GL, which is going to make your reconciliation from your subledger difficult, because if you enter transactions to the GL, it is not going to flow back to that subledger. And then the last thing that I wanted to just revisit quickly was the copy paste in the GL. So in financial, transactions, and our transaction entry, we've got our transaction here, and using that same layout. So if we have reference, our account number, not broken up in segments, it's just all together, and then our debit and credit, and then we have our paste function here. So you would highlight the line information, not the header, and then come into your transaction entry window and click paste, and that's going to populate your transaction. It's a fantastic function. I love it. I use it a lot for helping customers put in beginning balances if we're doing a new implementation, or if they're making changes, we're setting up a new company. It's a great way to bring in things like beginning balances, and it just makes it super easy. And then I will call out that we've got 2 additional user-defined fields here as well. So you can identify additional user-defined fields from the setup in the GL. And I see that I actually have a typo on that. It should be project. So I can fix that very quickly here. So I'm going to go into Setup General Ledger. And down below in our window, we have our new user-defined transaction labels. And I'm just going to retype that. That looks a little better. And click on OK. And now if I go back into my transactions and general, now it's project. And that's what I have for you today for new and uncommonly used features in Dynamics GP. Thank you all for joining the session. Thank you for voting for me. Thank you to DynamicsCon for putting this on. Appreciate it, and hope you all have a great day. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll be available after the session to answer questions. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day, and thank you all for joining us. I am Kelsey Urbis. I am with Stone Ridge Software, and I am the moderator for some of these questions that just came in with our presenter, Deb. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining.
Yes, thank you all so much. So let's just get right into these questions. I first want to bring up the one so kindly from Vicky. Vicky is asked the question, is there a way to mass update categories?
There is. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. One would be through a SQL query if you've got someone that's comfortable doing those types of updates to your categories. But for general users, using a macro would be an easy way to make those updates very quickly to your accounts. And that's definitely something that we can help you with. If you have questions on how to do a macro or just want assistance overall, we'd be happy to help you with that.
Super. Thanks, Deb. Mm-hmm. The other one that came in from Barry through the live chat was, can you show the payables copy paste? Maybe just even talk us through that here today.
Yep, so I'm not sharing my screen this morning, but to use the payables copy paste, and again, in the PowerPoint that you'll have access to within the month, I did put the layouts in there for the different copy paste transactions. And so to do a payables copy paste, you do have to have specific columns, similar to when you're doing a GL copy paste or the payroll copy paste, where you're going to have your vendor, the purchase amount, trade discount amount, freight, miscellaneous, your document number, your PO number, and cash. And then you go into your payables transaction, select your vendor, and then when you click on the purchasing field, then you can hit the paste button up at the top of the window, and that'll then paste in your transaction from your spreadsheet. Similar to the GL copy paste, you don't want to have the heading highlighted, so you just have your data highlighted for that transaction.
Super. Thanks, Deb. And for Barry and for Glenn, or for anybody that's joined us here this morning, if you would like additional details or you'd like those slides here in advance, I know DynamicsCon's great and they're going to be giving out that content, but they have a lot of great content out there. So if there's anything that you need immediately, feel free to reach out to our team. Just simply email us at solutions@stoneridgesoftware.com, and we'd be happy to circle back with you on that too. A couple of others that just did come in too, I want to be sure to bring up is for regarding fixed assets. Is there an import to bring in fixed assets?
Yes, so if you're adding fixed assets and you've maybe acquired a company and you want to mass add those fixed assets into your GP company, there is a import file that allows you, based on a particular layout, to import fixed assets into the company. So it's very easy to get additional fixed assets in, or to start using fixed assets if you're not using it currently.
Super. Folks, if you have any more questions as they come to your mind, feel free to put those in the chat. I did have one here that says, oh, sorry, Vicki, going back to yours. You had, how does it, going back to Vicki's, so that was regarding the mass update categories. How does it save time? Isn't it transaction by transaction, or are header info changes with each transaction?
So correct. You would have in the copy paste with a payables transaction, that would allow you just to do the whole transaction itself, along with the distributions in payables. So it just speeds up the process. If you've got multiple transactions that you need to enter in, you can enter those in at once. Similar to the GL copy paste, where if you have a very long transaction, like you're importing your payroll transactions and you don't have a specific import with that, by putting the transaction that you probably already have in Excel anyway into that format, you can import that in without having to manually key it in. So that's the time saver there, is not manually keying it again.
Yeah, sorry, correction, Vicki, was regarding payables, that payables copy paste piece. Sorry about that, Vicki.
And that was the same.
Okay, super. Another question that came in, before I do that, Vicki, I want to make sure that you get your question answered. So feel free to, okay, so she said, so the header info is also in the file. That would be great.
So in this case, you're still choosing the vendor, but you can add the distributions to it as well.
Super. Thank you. And then another one that came in here, since we have just a few more minutes, it's regarding GL Reconcile. So it says, can you do a range of activity more or less than 1 month?
Yep. So when you're using the GL Reconcile, and that's available for both, or rather all, for purchasing, so payables, bank rec, inventory, and receivables, you can do a range that's more than just 1 month. So if you're doing a reconcile and maybe you haven't started using it and you want to get in the habit of using that, you can go through and do a range longer than just a month, or a shorter range. So if there's a particular area and you know where there's a problem Maybe you need to uncheck the allow account entry because you've got people entering transactions directly to your main accounts like payables and receivables for your subledgers that you don't want those transactions in there because it's going to throw your reconcile off. So you can, by defining the dates in the reconcile window, do a range that's either longer or shorter than a month. It's not a requirement to do just a month.
Okay, super. We have a few more questions here. So I'm going to say, for payable copy paste, can we paste multiple vendors' transactions at once, or I can only copy paste transactions for one vendor each time?
No, you can do multiple vendors. So the vendor is included in that transaction. So you can do multiple payables transactions at one time.
Thank you. We have another question here in the chat. Is intercompany available without a third-party product?
It is. So within Dynamics GP, there's two different ways to use intercompany. One is a true intercompany where you have multiple GP companies set up. And what that means is when you go to log in, you have a drop-down list of your companies that are available to select from. The other way that you can do intercompany is called interfund, and that's where you define, based on a segment in your chart of accounts, multiple companies. So maybe you've got different breakouts of companies or divisions or departments, something that doesn't cross. And as a whole, they all have the same EIN number. So you can have them combined into one GP company, but we can use interfund for that. And what intercompany or interfund will do is they'll automatically create those due to, due from transactions for those different segments or companies, depending on what you're doing with that. If you do have specific questions on that, please feel free to reach out, like Kelsey said, and we can help you walk through and figure out what the best solution is for you.
Super, thank you. And we just had one more here, folks. We have about 3 more minutes for more questions. We have one here that didn't get addressed yet. So back to that copy paste layouts, where can we find the layouts for these?
So all the layouts are included in the my PowerPoint here, and I'll work with Kelsey also get those into a blog so that they're on our Stone Ridge blog site as well.
Super. Going back to that intercompany, I believe, so it's follow-up was, so only for same in?
Nope. So it just depends on how you're going to do that. If you have the same EIN, then you'd use interfund within one GP company. There is intercompanies that will cross companies if you have multiple EIN numbers. So when you log in, the way you can tell is if your drop down for your company list is more than one, then you would use intercompany. And if you just have a breakout within your one GP company, then you'd use interfund.
Super. Amanda, let us know if that didn't address or if it did, but we have just 1 more minute remaining here. So we'll keep our eye on the chat here for any of those last minute questions. But like we said, feel free to reach out to us, solutions@stoneridgesoftware.com, and we'll be sure to provide you any resources you're looking for, or if you have any questions that come to mind after today's sessions or throughout any of the great sessions here at DynamicsCon, if any come to mind as they come about. With that, I also saw that there's a breakout here after your session, so hopefully folks can go over there. I know David mentioned that. So with that, if there's no remaining questions, we'll just stick here over in the chat for 1 more minute. And really want to thank all of you for joining our session today. Deb, thank you for sharing your knowledge with all of us. And thank you again, DynamicsCon,